I never imagined my life would unravel over something as small as a late-night text message. It was a Tuesday evening after a long shift at the factory, and I was bone-tired. My wife, Emily, sat on the couch with her phone in hand, the screen's glow reflecting in her eyes. Normally, she would greet me with a warm smile or a kiss, but that night she barely looked up. When her phone buzzed with a new message, she tilted it away, hiding whatever was on the screen. It was a subtle gesture, but it struck me in the gut. A quiet alarm bell started ringing in my mind. As a working-class guy, I'd always prided myself on being straightforward and trusting. Emily and I built our marriage on what I thought was mutual honesty. But recently, there had been little signs that something was off. She had started working late more often, claiming her new project demanded extra hours. Sometimes she'd come home with the faint scent of a cologne that wasn't mine. I told myself I was imagining things, that stress and overtime were the culprits for her distance. But the guarded way she cradled her phone told a different story. That night, I tried to shrug off my unease. I heated up leftover spaghetti, the clatter of dishes the only sound between us. Emily was unusually quiet, eyes glued to her screen. My attempts at small talk fell flat. "Everything okay?" I asked gently, leaning against the kitchen doorway. She jumped slightly, as if startled, and plastered on a quick smile. "Yeah, fine," she replied too quickly. "Just a lot on my mind with work." Her explanation sounded rehearsed, and she didn't meet my eyes for more than a second. In our 8 years of marriage, I had learned to read her moods. I knew the stress lines on her forehead, the tone of her voice when something bothered her. This was something different, an evasiveness I hadn't heard before. Later that week, the uneasy feeling only grew. One night, I woke up past midnight to find the other side of the bed empty. I found Emily downstairs in the living room, pacing with her phone pressed to her ear. She lowered her voice, thinking I couldn't hear her urgent whispers. My heart thudded as I caught fragments of her side of the conversation. "I know. But he might suspect. No, not yet. I'll see you tomorrow." When she noticed me on the staircase, she hung up abruptly. We stood there in the dark for a moment, the air thick with unspoken questions. "Who was that?" I asked quietly, trying and failing to keep the tremor out of my voice. My mind churned with possibilities, each more painful than the last. Emily ran a hand through her hair. "Just a coworker. We had a last-minute issue at work," she lied, voice steady but eyes flashing with guilt. I wanted to believe her, but my instincts told me otherwise. The trust that had always been our foundation felt like it was cracking beneath us. I nodded slowly, not wanting to reveal that I doubted her. "All right," I mumbled, turning back toward the bedroom. My chest was tight, and a cold sweat had broken out on my neck. As I climbed into bed alone, a realization took shape in the darkness. There was something she wasn't telling me. My thoughts raced in circles, and I barely slept the rest of the night. A sense of dread settled in my stomach, one I could no longer ignore. In the following days, I started paying more attention to the details I'd overlooked. Emily changed the password on her phone, a small act, but we'd always been open with each other's devices. She started dressing a little nicer for work too, new blouses, a touch more makeup, perfume that lingered in the morning air when she kissed my cheek goodbye. When I casually asked about her day in the evenings, her answers were vague and hurried, like she was eager to escape the conversation. Every "I love you" I gave was returned with a distracted "love you too" that felt more like an echo than a real reply. The gnawing suspicion became impossible to ignore. I felt a mix of guilt and anger for even doubting her. Guilt because I wanted to trust my wife. Anger because some part of me already knew the truth. I was raised to be a good man, to treat my wife right, and work hard. Up until now, I thought I'd done everything by the book. Overtime shifts to pay the mortgage on our modest house, surprise flowers on birthdays and our anniversary, listening when she vented about her day. But if I was doing everything right, why did it feel like I was suddenly losing her? One Saturday, my questions found an answer I wasn't ready to face. Emily said she was heading out to run errands across town. After she left, that gut feeling pushed me off the couch. I grabbed my jacket and keys and decided to follow, heart pounding in my throat. I told myself I was crazy, that I should just trust her. But my feet kept moving. I trailed her car at a distance, through our neighborhood and beyond, until she took an unexpected turn onto the highway leading toward the upscale part of the city. My pulse quickened. There were no shopping centers or grocery stores out that way, just expensive restaurants, hotels, and office parks. Finally, she pulled into the parking lot of a high-end hotel, the kind with valet parking and a fountain out front. I parked on the street a block away, adrenaline making my hands shake. From behind a row of manicured bushes, I watched as a man in a tailored suit strolled up to her. He was tall, with an arrogance in his posture that I could sense even from a distance. Emily smiled in a way I hadn't seen in a long time, a radiant, eager smile, and the man casually draped an arm around her waist. I felt my stomach twist painfully as I saw her lean into him. It was like a dagger to the heart. I wanted to burst from my hiding spot and confront them right there. My fists clenched involuntarily, knuckles white with rage. But an odd numbness rooted me in place. I watched as they disappeared through the hotel's revolving door, my world shattering in the reflection of its glass. In that moment, suspicion hardened into cold, devastating certainty. My wife was having an affair. I stood there in a daze for what felt like forever, until the chill of the evening snapped me back to reality. When I finally got back into my truck, I realized I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt. The radio played softly in the background, some upbeat pop song cruelly out of sync with the turmoil inside me. I turned it off and sat in silence, trying to process what I had just seen. A mix of sorrow and fury crashed over me in waves. I never thought this could happen to us, to me. But it was happening, and I couldn't pretend anymore. As I drove home, one thought burned bright amid the haze of hurt. I needed to know exactly what I was up against. If this man in the suit thought he could steal my wife and get away with it, he was about to find out just how wrong he was. I sat in the living room in darkness, the only light a dim glow from the street lamp outside. My mind replayed the scene at the hotel on an endless loop. Emily in another man's arms, her joyful smile, the ease with which she leaned into him. Each replay was a fresh stab of pain. By the time I heard her car in the driveway, my emotions had twisted into a tight knot of rage, hurt, and disbelief. I felt like a live wire, sparks of anger threatening to snap. The front door opened, and Emily walked in, keys jingling. She flicked on the light and jumped when she saw me sitting there. "Jack?" she stammered, clearly not expecting me to be waiting. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" I rose slowly, clenching and unclenching my fists to stay in control. "Long day," I said quietly, my voice strained. "How about you? Get all your errands done?" She avoided my eyes as she set her purse down. "Yeah, just the usual stuff," she muttered, but her tone was off. There was a hitch in her voice, like even she didn't believe her own words. I took a step forward. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it might burst. "The usual stuff, huh?" I echoed, bitterness creeping into my tone. "Did that include a stop at the Grand Oaks Hotel?" Her head snapped up, eyes wide. In an instant, her face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence between us was heavy and suffocating. "I followed you," I said, answering the question she hadn't asked. My voice trembled, despite my efforts to steady it. "I know, Emily. I know what you've been doing." Emily's lips parted, and then closed again. She looked like a child caught doing something forbidden. "Jack," she finally whispered, stepping towards me with pleading eyes. "It's not what you think." A sharp, humorless laugh escaped my throat. "Not what I think? I saw you with him. Please let me explain." "Explain what?" I snarled, the anger rising faster now. I felt it surging, hot and bitter. "Explain how my wife of 8 years ends up in a hotel with another man? Explain the lies, the sneaking around? Go ahead, Emily. Explain it to me, because I'm dying to understand." She burst into tears then, covering her face with her hands. I had seen Emily cry before, but never like this. These were panicked, guilty sobs. Part of me ached to see her like that, instinctively wanting to comfort her, but I fought that urge. I reminded myself this pain was of her making. "It just happened," she choked out between sobs. "I never meant to hurt you. I swear I didn't plan for this." "Who is he?" I demanded, my hands shaking. "Is he someone from your work? Someone I know?" She lowered her hands slightly. Mascara streaked under her eyes. "His name is Richard," she said quietly. He's one of the senior partners at the firm." She sniffled, trying to catch her breath. "I was assigned to his team a few months ago. We started spending a lot of time together at work, late meetings, business trips. One night we crossed a line. Richard." I rolled the name around in my mind and felt a fresh wave of anger. A senior partner, her boss, essentially. A wealthy man in a suit who thought nothing of seducing a married woman. My jaw tightened. "And you decided our marriage was worth risking for this Richard? For some fling with a rich guy?" Emily flinched at the word fling. "It wasn't like that, Jack. I didn't seek it out. He was charming and attentive. I felt appreciated in ways I hadn't in a long time." Her voice faltered as she saw my reaction. "I know that sounds awful. I felt like I was fading into the background here. You were always working late and I was lonely. Richard listened to me. He made me feel special." Her words hit me like slaps to the face. "Lonely? I was working those late shifts for us, Emily. For our future. How could you not see that?" I ran a hand through my hair, feeling a desperate mix of betrayal and disbelief. "And instead of talking to me, you turned to him?" She stepped forward as if to touch me, but I backed away. I saw something harden in her expression then. Maybe realization that I wasn't going to comfort her, that I wasn't going to just sweep this under the rug. Her tears kept flowing. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." I had imagined this confrontation 1,000 ways in my head in the past hour, and none of them felt like this, a hollow ache beneath the fury. My eyes stung, but I refused to let myself cry in front of her. "You didn't want to hurt me? Well, you sure as hell did." My voice cracked, despite my attempt to sound strong. "Was it worth it, Emily? Was he worth it?" She didn't answer immediately. The hesitation was all the answer I needed. My vision blurred with angry tears. I turned away, pacing a few steps to gather myself. I couldn't believe this was happening. Minutes passed in agonizing silence but for her soft crying. "Jack," she said finally, her voice small. "I love you. I never stopped loving you. This was a mistake. I ended it with Richard tonight, I swear. That's what that meeting was. I wanted to tell him it was over, that I couldn't keep doing this to you." I spun around, searching her face. "Do you think I can believe that? That you just magically ended it the same day I caught you? You expect me to buy that coincidence?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, unable to find a convincing response. A bitter thought crossed my mind. Perhaps she was only saying that now to save herself. "Even if that's true," I continued hoarsely, "the damage is done. You broke us, Emily. You shattered everything." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "I gave you all I had. I would have done anything for you. And you repaid me by sneaking around with some rich suit the moment I wasn't around enough." Anger flared in her eyes now, mixing with the guilt. "That's not fair," she shot back. "You make it sound like I was out looking for it. I wasn't. I tried to ignore it, but Richard, he kept pursuing me. He said all the right things. By the time I realized what I was doing, it had gone too far. I felt trapped." I let out a sharp breath. "Trapped? You could have said no. You could have told me you were unhappy. We could have fixed things, Emily. You had choices. Don't make excuses for him or yourself. You knew what you were doing." My voice echoed in our small living room, full of hurt. She broke down again, sinking onto the arm of the couch, face in her hands. I stood there, a storm of emotions raging inside me. Betrayal, anger, heartbreak. This was the woman I had planned to spend the rest of my life with, now reduced to a stranger who had lied to me for months. After a long moment, she looked up, her face a wreck of tears and smeared makeup. What now?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Can you ever forgive me?" I felt a lump in my throat the size of a fist. Forgiveness? The thought was almost absurd at that moment. I wanted to scream that I could never forgive her, that I hated her for what she did. Yet beneath that fury, I still felt the raw pain of love betrayed. "I don't know," I said honestly, my tone cold. "I need you to leave. I can't look at you right now." She winced as if I'd slapped her. "Leave. Jack, please." She stood, reaching out to touch my arm. This time I didn't move away in time, and her fingers brushed my sleeve. "We can talk more. Go to counseling or something. I know I've ruined everything, but maybe in time." I recoiled, finally pulling free of her touch as if it burned. "In time?" I repeated, anger surging anew. "In time what? I'll forget the image of you with him? In time I'll stop hearing the lies every time you said you loved me? God, Emily." I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing back tears. "Just go. Go to a friend's. Or go to him for all I care. I can't deal with this right now." Her face crumpled at that. For a second I thought she might argue, but then she gave a tiny nod. She stood there, arms wrapped around herself. "I'll go to my sister's," she whispered. She hesitated at the doorway, looking back at me. "I'm so sorry, Jack." I had no answer for her. I just stood rigid, staring at the wall as she quietly opened the door and slipped out into the night. The moment the door closed behind her, I collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. A strangled sound escaped my throat, somewhere between a sob and a shout. The house was painfully silent now. I was alone with my agony. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark after she left. Minutes? Hours? It was all a blur of tears and rage. At some point, I slammed my fist against the coffee table, sending a stack of magazines tumbling to the floor. The physical pain in my hand was nothing compared to the torment in my chest. I thought about the life we had built, the lazy Sunday mornings, the inside jokes, the plans for the future, and felt them all crumble into ash. I had always pictured myself growing old with Emily, maybe raising kids someday, building a comfortable life step by step. Now that future had been violently ripped away. In its place was a yawning void of uncertainty and hurt. My mind flashed again to the image of that man holding her. Richard, an ember of hatred sparked amid the sorrow. My father used to have a saying, "Everybody answers for their actions eventually." Sitting there in the emptiness of our living room, my heart shattered. I made a silent promise to myself. Emily and her lover were going to answer for this. One way or another, they would feel the pain that they had inflicted on me. I wasn't sure how or when yet, but a determination was forming in the back of my mind. Ruthless and cold. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days following Emily's departure passed in a numb haze. I called in sick at work, unable to summon the energy to face anyone. In our small town, news travels fast, and I didn't want sympathetic looks or awkward conversations before I could even wrap my head around my next steps. I spent hours on the couch and at the kitchen table, surrounded by the ghosts of our life together. The silence in the house was deafening. At first, I was paralyzed by heartbreak. I hardly ate or slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. Every creak of the floorboards at night made me startle, foolishly hoping it was her coming home, then remembering with a fresh stab why she wasn't there. In quieter moments, self-doubt crept in. Had I driven her away by working too much? Should I have noticed her unhappiness sooner? I spent one afternoon staring at our wedding photo on the mantel, wondering how the smiling young woman in the white dress became the stranger who betrayed me. But each time those thoughts nearly broke me, the ember of anger inside fanned brighter. When the pain became too much, I clung to that anger like a lifeline. I needed it to survive. I needed it to take action, to do something other than drown in sorrow. 3 days after she left, I found myself hunched over my laptop late at night, eyes burning from hours of sleeplessness. I typed search after search. Spouse infidelity, what to do. Cheating wife, legal options. Divorce cheating consequences. Amid forums of heartbroken spouses and advice columns, one thing became clear. In most places, adultery was more a moral wrongdoing than a criminal one. Cheaters often walked away unscathed, free to start a new life while leaving their mess behind. The unfairness of it made my blood boil. As I scrolled, however, I stumbled on something that made me sit up straight. It was a news article about a man in a situation much like mine. His wife had cheated, and not only did he divorce her, but he took the other man to court and won a hefty judgment. Alienation of affection, the article said, a legal term I'd never heard before, commonly called a homewrecker law. I clicked on more links, reading case after case in disbelief. In a few states, including our own, a spouse can sue their partner's lover for damages for breaking up the marriage. It sounded old-fashioned and vindictive, but right now I didn't mind being a little old-fashioned or vindictive. A spark of grim excitement flared in me. I wasn't crazy. This was actually a legal path to make Richard pay for what he'd done, for what they'd done. I rubbed my eyes and kept reading into the early hours. The idea of dragging that smug, wealthy bastard into court and airing out his sins had a dark appeal, And if it could ruin him financially or publicly, even better. He had swooped in with his tailored suit and easy money, treating my marriage like something he could just take because he wanted to. Well, I had a say in it too. The next morning, running on coffee and adrenaline, I made 2 phone calls that would start the wheels of revenge turning. The first was to a local law firm that had good reviews online for handling tough divorces. I set up a consultation for the following day. The second call was to my credit union. If I was going to wage a legal war, I needed to know my finances. We didn't have much savings, but I was willing to pour every dollar I had into this if necessary. It wasn't just about money. It was about justice and, I admit, payback. Walking into the law firm's office the next day, I felt out of place. The lobby was sleek and modern, and I still wore my work boots and a flannel shirt. Having come straight from a half shift, I forced myself to attend. A young receptionist led me to a conference room where I met my attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Michelle. As I poured out my story in halting words, her expression shifted from professional neutrality to something almost like empathy. "First of all, I'm sorry you're going through this," Michelle said, passing me a tissue when I cleared my throat awkwardly after realizing my eyes were wet. I hadn't meant to get emotional in front of a stranger, but saying it all out loud made it raw again. She got down to business soon enough. We discussed filing for divorce. Our state was a no-fault divorce state, meaning I didn't have to prove infidelity to get a divorce, but evidence of the affair could affect things like alimony. Emily earned much less than me, and normally might be entitled to spousal support, except if I could prove she cheated. Cheaters, it turned out, often forfeit certain rights in divorce proceedings around here. The knowledge felt like the first break I'd gotten. "Now, about this other action you mentioned," Michelle said, folding her hands. "Alienation of affection. It's not commonly pursued, but it's very real. In this state, you have the right to sue your wife's paramour for damages. I have to ask, are you sure you want to go down that path? It's a battle not just for money, but it can turn ugly, very personal." I thought of Richard's arm around my wife, the confident way he led her inside that hotel, like he didn't have a care in the world. I thought of the nights I spent alone while she was working, late, and how he must have laughed behind my back. The humiliation, the loss. I wanted him to feel all of it. "I'm sure," I replied firmly. "I want to pursue it." He didn't think twice about wrecking my marriage. He doesn't get to walk away clean. Michelle nodded. "All right. If we do this, we'll need solid evidence of the affair. Dates, times, places. The stronger the proof, the better our chances in court. Hotel records, photos of them together, messages, anything you can get." I silently berated myself for not taking a photo that day. In the shock of the moment, it hadn't even crossed my mind. No, just my own eyes. But I might have some phone records or receipts. I'm not sure. In truth, I hadn't yet scoured our accounts or phone bills. My mind was still reeling from the emotional side of things. "We can subpoena records later if need be," she said. "But it might be wise to hire a private investigator, someone who can discreetly gather evidence. Often, they'll catch what we can't." The idea of trailing after them with cameras gave me a grim satisfaction. If Emily and Richard were still seeing each other, a PI would find out. And if they weren't, perhaps evidence of their past rendezvous could still be uncovered. I nodded. "Yes, I think that's a good idea. Do you have anyone you recommend?" "Actually, yes," Michelle said, offering a thin smile. "There's a private investigator I've worked with on a few cases. She's very good with domestic investigations. I'll warn you, these services aren't cheap, But if you're committed to this course, it could be money well spent. I straightened in my chair. After what they've done, I'm committed. I'll find the money. The thought of expenses was daunting, but my resolve was unwavering. All right, her name is Rachel Miller. Michelle jotted down a number on the back of her business card and slid it across the table. Give her a call and explain what you need. I'll forward her the basics of what we've discussed, with your permission, so she's up to speed. Please do, I replied, taking the card. The name was neatly printed along with a phone number. Rachel Miller, private investigator. After firming up a few more details, filing the divorce petition, instructions not to talk to Emily directly about legal matters, I left the attorney's office with a new sense of purpose. I had a plan, or at least the beginnings of one. It wouldn't mend my broken heart, but it gave me something to focus on beyond the pain. That afternoon, I made the call. My hands trembled a bit as I dialed the PI's number, both from nerves and from the simmering anger I felt at having to involve a stranger in this mess. After a couple of rings, a clear, confident female voice answered, Rachel Miller speaking. I introduced myself hesitantly. Hi, my name is Jack Thompson. My attorney, Michelle Carter, gave me your number. She said you could help me with an infidelity case. Yes, she emailed me just a little while ago, Rachel replied, her tone professional yet not unkind. I'm sorry you're going through this. Why don't you tell me a bit about what you need? There was something reassuring about her voice. I walked to the window as I spoke, looking out at the quiet street while summarizing the nightmare my life had become in the past week. I told her about catching my wife with another man, about wanting evidence for both the divorce and the lawsuit against the other man. She listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I'd finished, Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said, All right, Jack, I understand. You've taken the right steps with the lawyer. My role will be to gather any proof of the affair that we can. That usually means surveillance, photos, maybe video, identifying witnesses if possible. Also, digging into any paper trails, phone records, emails, credit card receipts. Do you have access to your phone bill or her accounts? Sometimes those show frequent communication or spending that can help. I have online access to our cell phone plan and the joint credit card, I said. I haven't looked at them yet, but I will. Good. Save any records that look suspicious. Meanwhile, I'll start my end of investigations. If your wife is still seeing him, I'll find out. If not, I may still be able to gather evidence from hotel staff or other sources. It's often surprising what people will share with a polite inquiry and a little incentive. There was a confident edge to her voice that made me feel, for the first time in days, that I wasn't fighting this battle alone. We arranged to meet in person the next day so I could give her photos of Emily and any info I had on Richard. Full name, where he worked, what car he drove. I remembered the make and partial plate from the hotel parking lot. When I hung up, I realized I felt something unexpected, a small bud of hope amid the anger. Not hope for my marriage, that was beyond saving, but hope that I might actually come out of this nightmare with some measure of justice. That night, for the first time since the confrontation, I slept solidly. There was still a long road ahead, but now I had allies. I wasn't just a victim of their betrayal. I was a man preparing to fight back, and I was determined to win. The next day, I met Rachel in person at a small coffee shop near downtown. I spotted her immediately when I walked in, mid-30s, dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket, a camera bag at her side. She had an air of confidence about her, but when she saw me, her expression softened into a polite, understanding smile. I realized I must have looked a wreck, with bloodshot eyes and a posture weighed down by stress. "Jack?" she asked, standing and extending her hand. "That's me," I said, shaking her hand. "You must be Rachel." "It's nice to meet you in person," she said. We settled into a quiet corner booth, coffees in hand. I had brought a folder with me containing what little I had, printouts of the phone records I'd pulled up the night before, showing dozens of calls and texts to a number I now knew was Richard's, and copies of credit card statements highlighting suspicious charges, fancy dinners, a hotel charge, even a jewelry store purchase I'd never heard about. Each piece of paper felt like a tiny betrayal of its own. "This is good," Rachel said, flipping through the papers. "It helps to have a timeline of their communications and spending. Now let me share what I've found." She took out her tablet and showed me a series of photographs. My stomach clenched as I realized what I was looking at. Emily and Richard, just yesterday, meeting for lunch on the patio of an upscale bistro across town. In one photo, he had his hand on hers across the table. In another, they walked arm in arm back to his car. My jaw tightened. "She told me she ended it," I muttered, feeling the wound freshen. The photos clearly showed otherwise. Rachel gave me a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry. Affairs often don't end cleanly, even when they're found out. Sometimes they go deeper into hiding instead." She tapped the tablet. After these were taken, I followed them. They went back to his house. He has a place in the Lakeside Heights neighborhood, right? I nodded. Emily had mentioned the general area where some of the senior partners lived, though we'd never been. It was an upscale community, far fancier than our little house. "They stayed in for the afternoon, so I couldn't get more photos beyond them going in together," she said. "But given the circumstances, it's pretty damning." I swallowed hard, staring at the images. It was one thing to suspect and even witness them once, but to see photo evidence laid out so plainly, it made my blood boil and heart ache at the same time. These are good evidence," I managed, my voice low. "They are," she agreed, and I didn't stop there. I paid a visit to the Grand Oaks Hotel, discreetly, of course. She gave a faint smile that suggested she had her ways. I chatted up a desk clerk. I might have implied I was investigating some billing, discrepancies for a client. Slipped a little incentive. And I got a look at their guest logs. Your wife and Richard were frequent guests there over the last few months. He always booked the room in his name, but sometimes added her name for access. I have copies of the records, unofficially obtained, but they'll at least let your lawyer know what to subpoena formally. I sat back, exhaling slowly. "You're really good at this," I said, both impressed and grateful. Rachel shrugged modestly. "I've been doing it for a while, and I hate to say, infidelity cases are pretty common." Her eyes met mine, and there was a flicker of understanding in them. "I know how painful this must be for you. We can stop for today, if it's too much, or we can focus on next steps. It's your call." For a moment, I considered pushing all the papers and photos aside and just escaping this reality. But I knew there was no escaping it. "No, let's keep going. I need to see this through." She nodded, and we discussed plans. Over the next week, Rachel would continue surveillance. We suspected that now, with me out of the picture at home, Emily might spend more time with Richard openly. That could yield more evidence and perhaps even witness statements if neighbors noticed. Meanwhile, I would keep gathering any records I could find, emails, social media info, anything that might reveal the depths of the affair. Before we parted, Rachel looked at me with a hint of concern. "And how are you holding up, Jack? Honestly, I know diving into the evidence can be like opening the wound over and over. I paused, surprised by the personal question. In the flurry of legal and investigative action, no one had really asked me that since the initial shock. I'm managing, I said slowly. Some moments I'm furious. Other times I feel like I'm going to break down completely. I keep wondering how the hell my life turned into this. She gave a knowing nod. I get it. More than you might think. There was a shadow in her expression now, like a memory passing behind her eyes. Something in her tone made me ask, have you been through this, something like this before? Rachel hesitated, then offered a faint, wry smile. Yeah, I have. A few years ago, I was in your wife's position. In a way. Married young. Thought it was forever. My husband cheated on me with his secretary. She let out a bitter chuckle. I didn't handle it as constructively as you are. I kind of fell apart for a while. Eventually, I found my way out of that hole, and I guess that experience led me into this line of work, helping others find the truth that was kept from them. I absorbed her words, feeling a strange mix of sadness for her and relief that someone truly understood. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said quietly. I wouldn't wish this on anyone. Thanks, she replied. But hey, I survived. And you will too. It might not feel like it now, but you will. Her certainty was reassuring, almost contagious. It's hard to see the light at the end of it, I admitted, voice faltering. One minute I'm hell-bent on revenge. The next I feel guilty for even wanting it. Part of me still can't get over the fact that the person I loved more than anything chose to do this. That's normal, she said softly. Grief and anger aren't mutually exclusive. You loved your wife. That doesn't shut off overnight just because she hurt you. But that doesn't mean you have to forgive her either. You can love the person she once was and still hold her accountable for what she's done now. I stared at my coffee, her words sinking in. In all my internal turmoil, I hadn't been able to articulate that conflict. But she was right. I still loved the woman I thought Emily was, even as I hated what she had done. It was a relief to have someone put that into words without judgment. You're really easy to talk to, you know that? I said, attempting a small smile. Rachel laughed lightly. Hazard of the job. People tend to spill their guts to PIs. We're like therapists who can legally break into your email. She winked, making me chuckle for the first time in recent memory. As I left the cafe that day, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Yes, I was neck-deep in a quest to ruin two people who had betrayed me. But I had found an unexpected ally who understood my pain in a way few could. Rachel's encouragement and empathy were a stark contrast to the lies and coldness I'd received from Emily in those final months. With Rachel and my lawyer in my corner, I felt a steadfast determination. I wasn't alone in this fight, and that made all the difference. Over the next couple of weeks, life took on a strange new rhythm. By day, I returned to work and tried to maintain a facade of normalcy, though I was quieter than before. I hadn't told any coworkers the details, just that Emily and I were separating. The rumor mill likely filled in the blanks, but I didn't care. After work, my time was consumed with the mission at hand. I met with Michelle, my lawyer, to update her on evidence. And I frequently met or spoke with Rachel to hear what she'd uncovered. Her reports came in steadily. She caught them on camera several more times, at a park together on a Sunday afternoon, leaving a movie theater on a Friday night, even kissing on his driveway when they thought no one was looking. Each new set of images hurt to see, but they strengthened our case. Rachel even managed to retrieve a copy of an email Emily had sent to the hotel's reservation desk from our home computer, one where she brazenly confirmed a booking for two under Richard's name. It shocked me to see how brazen they'd been. As the evidence piled up, Michelle began drafting the lawsuit against Richard. The divorce paperwork was also in motion. Emily had been formally served through her attorney. I learned through a terse email from Emily, the only direct contact she'd made since leaving, that she had retained a lawyer too. She wrote that she wanted us to handle the divorce civilly and hoped we could talk soon. I forwarded the email to Michelle and ignored it otherwise. I wasn't interested in any private talks without my lawyer, especially not ones where she might try to talk me out of the lawsuit or manipulate me emotionally. If Emily was upset about being sued, I didn't know. I imagined the news had reached Richard by now as well, since we filed the alienation of affection lawsuit shortly after gathering the key evidence. I could picture his arrogance turning to outrage when he got served by a process server. The thought was a small, satisfying balm to my wounded pride. Still, I knew better than to celebrate early. The legal battles were just beginning, and Richard, with all his money, would surely hire an expensive legal team to try to swat my claims aside. We prepared for that. Michelle was thorough, and we had truth on our side, which counted for something. I also suspected Richard would lean on Emily to support him, perhaps pressuring her to say our marriage was already failing or that I was to blame for her straying. We went over strategies for that too. If they wanted a fight, I was ready to give them the fiercest one I could muster. All the while, amid strategy sessions and evidence charts, there was Rachel. More than once, after a long day, I'd find myself on the phone with her, ostensibly to discuss progress, but lingering in conversation about lighter things. She had a dry sense of humor and a hearty laugh that came easier as we got more comfortable. We talked about music we liked, the dumb reality shows she watched to unwind, the old pickup truck I was restoring in my garage. It felt strange and good to have these normal conversations sprinkled among the chaos of my revenge saga. I knew I was treading on delicate ground. My heart was nowhere near ready to trust again. Not fully. But I couldn't deny the growing ease I felt with Rachel, the way her presence in my life had become something I looked forward to. She was careful to maintain professional boundaries, never bringing anything personal into our face-to-face work, except those moments I needed a friend more than a PI. Yet I sensed a mutual understanding between us that went beyond client and investigator. Two people scarred by betrayal, both determined to come out stronger. In a world that had flipped upside down for me, she was a small pocket of stability and sincerity. As the legal wheels turned, a surprising opportunity to strengthen my case presented itself. One evening, about a week after the lawsuits were filed, I got a call from Emily. I stared at her name blinking on my phone screen, a storm of emotions raging inside me. Part of me didn't want to answer. What was there left to say? But curiosity and a lingering ache made me swipe to accept the call. "Hello?" My voice came out rough. "Jack. Hi." Her voice was cautious, soft. It struck me that this was the first time we had spoken since that night I told her to leave. "How are you?" I nearly laughed at the question. How did she expect I was? "Been better," I said flatly. "What do you need, Emily?" She inhaled audibly. "I was hoping we could talk, in person. There's so much. I feel like we left things without really discussing everything, and with lawyers involved now." She trailed off, but I caught her drift. She wanted to talk outside of official channels. My first instinct was to refuse. But then a cold, calculated thought slid into my mind. This could be a chance. If she wanted to talk, perhaps I could get her to open up, maybe even to admit things that would help me. I remembered Michelle saying any admissions from her could be useful in our case against Richard. And deep down, I also wanted to hear her reasons again, to see if anything she said could bring me closure. "All right," I said after a pause. "We can meet." She sounded almost surprised. "Really? Thank you. Maybe at the house? I need to pick up a few things anyway, and I figured it would be easier for you." Our house, technically still both of ours until the divorce, had become my solitary domain. The thought of her stepping back into it made my chest tighten. But it was also a familiar private setting, which might make her more comfortable to talk and easier to record without notice. One-party consent state or not, I didn't want to think too hard about the ethics. I just wanted the truth documented. "Tomorrow evening work?" I managed to ask. "Yes, I'll come by around 7, if that's okay." Her voice held a note of hope. "And Jack, thank you." I hung up without replying. Thank me? For agreeing to talk? After what she did, the gall of her gratitude was almost laughable. Still, as I set down the phone, I realized my heart was hammering. I immediately called Michelle to inform her of Emily's request to meet, and my plan to record our conversation. She cautioned me to be careful, no matter what. Keep things calm and legal. I promised I would. Next, I informed Rachel, who provided a small digital recorder. "Better quality than a phone recording and easier to conceal," she said as she handed it to me with a knowing look. "Be safe and good luck." The next day crawled by. I left work early to straighten up the house, partially to make it look less like the lair of a man consumed by revenge, as it had become with papers and notes everywhere, and partially to burn off nervous energy. I reheated a cup of coffee gone cold and sat at the kitchen table, the digital recorder small and innocuous in my palm. I tested it twice to be sure I knew how it worked and that it picked up sound clearly. I hid it in the living room, tucked between two books on the shelf near the couch where I anticipated we'd talk. It felt devious and strange to be taking such measures against the woman I once trusted with everything. But then I reminded myself, she had been devious and strange with me for months. This was a necessary means to an end. At 7 sharp, her car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the front window as she stepped out. My heart did an unexpected flip. She looked like the Emily I remembered, in a simple blue blouse I always liked and jeans, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. For a second, it was like seeing my wife come home on any normal day. But nothing about this was normal now. I opened the door before she could knock. "Hi," I said quietly. "Hi." She gave a tentative smile. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before I moved aside and let her in. As she walked by, I caught the faint scent of her perfume, nostalgic and painful. She glanced around the living room. "Place looks tidy," she said, as if searching for neutral ground. "I've had time on my hands," I replied. I gestured to the couch. "Have a seat. You said you wanted to talk." Emily sat down, smoothing her hands over her knees. I took the armchair opposite, leaning forward with elbows on my thighs, trying to appear more relaxed than I felt. The recorder was only a few feet away, silent witness to our encounter. She cleared her throat. "First, thank you for seeing me. I know I'm probably the last person you want to talk to." "You're right about that," I said with a touch of acid. I couldn't help it. She winced. "I deserve that." A pause. I wanted to apologize again, and to try to explain a little better than I did that night. You were so angry, justifiably, And I was a mess. I didn't say things right. I held up a hand, feigning a calmer demeanor. I'm listening. Explain it now. She took a deep breath. Jack, I never set out to hurt you. I was unhappy and lonely, and I handled it in the worst way possible. When I met Richard, I felt this spark I thought I'd lost. It was exciting, new, but that was no excuse. I should have tried harder to talk to you, to fix what was wrong. What was wrong exactly? I asked, tilting my head. Was I that horrible of a husband? No, she said quickly, eyes wide. No, you were a good husband. You are a good man, Jack. You have to know that. You worked so hard for us. Gave me everything I needed except... She hesitated. Except what? I prompted, heart thudding. This was exactly the kind of statement I hoped she'd make. One that I could later use to show I wasn't some monster that pushed her away. She wiped a tear from her eye. Except time and attention, I guess. We got into a rut. You were always tired. I was always stressed. We stopped communicating. I felt invisible. And then Richard comes along at work. And he noticed me. Flattered me. It felt nice to be seen again, wanted again. And I made the worst mistake of my life by giving in to it. It was hard to hide the bitterness in my voice, but I managed to keep my tone measured. So if I had been more attentive, you wouldn't have cheated. She shook her head. I don't want to put this on you. It was my failing, my weakness. I'm just explaining what was going on in my head, not excusing it. There's no excuse. I betrayed you and threw away our marriage for what? For excitement? For an ego boost? Her voice cracked with self-directed anger. I was selfish and stupid. Silence fell. I watched her, trying to discern sincerity in her face. It looked genuine enough. She was crying softly, not theatrically, more like someone who has cried a lot in private and has nothing left but regret. A small part of me felt sorry for her, but I reminded myself how many nights I had cried just like that while she was lying to my face. Why are you telling me all this now? I asked quietly. Emily sniffled. Because I miss you. Because I ruined the best thing in my life and now I'm facing the consequences. And I don't want to lose you completely, even if I know I probably already have. She looked down at her hands. I was hoping, maybe foolishly, that we could find a way to handle this without tearing each other apart. The divorce and the lawsuit. It's a lot. Lawyers make everything so hostile. I thought maybe we could talk about a path forward ourselves. There it was, the subtle hint at what she truly wanted. She wanted me to reconsider the scorched earth approach, to settle quietly, perhaps not go through with dragging Richard into court. She might have been prodded by him to do this, or she genuinely feared how ugly things could get. I leaned back, feigning contemplation. A path forward. What would that look like to you? She looked up hopefully. We could proceed with an uncontested divorce, for one. We split things fairly, no fighting. And you could drop the alienation lawsuit against Richard. It's only going to make everything more painful and public for all of us. I know you're hurt and angry, and you have every right to be. But that lawsuit, it won't change what I did. It will just drag this out longer. My jaw tightened. So he had sent her to try to talk me down, or at least she was speaking his lines. He asked you to ask me that? Her eyes flashed. No, he didn't ask me. He doesn't control me, Jack. I'm thinking about everyone involved. My family, your family. This will hurt so many people if it goes to court. I took a slow breath. careful to keep my voice from rising. Emily, do you love him? She looked startled. I care about him, but I don't know. Everything is such a mess right now. I thought I did, but now. She looked at me, eyes pleading. I know I love you. That hasn't gone away, twisted as that may sound. I hate myself for what I did. If I could take it back. She broke off, wiping her face. For a moment I almost believed her. Or rather, I believed that she regretted it deeply now that she was paying the price. Whether it was regret for hurting me or regret for the consequences to her life, I wasn't sure. Taking it back isn't an option, I said, keeping my tone even. All we can do is deal with what's in front of us. You say you want to do this amicably, split things fairly? You mean that? She nodded vigorously. Yes. I don't want to fight you in court. I don't want to fight at all. I just want to fix what I can. Then answer something honestly. Did Richard knowingly and intentionally come between us? Did he encourage you to leave me? She hesitated. Jack, you want amicable. I want truth, I said, trying to sound not desperate for the answer, but firm. Did he know you were married from the start? She swallowed. Yes, he knew. I never hid that. And did that stop him from pursuing you? Or did he chase you anyway? Her eyes fell. He pursued. I told him it was wrong, but he kept at it, and I eventually let it happen. I felt a grim satisfaction. Her words, caught on tape, were gold. Did he encourage you to separate from me? She looked away, voice small. Yes. He said that if we were unhappy, maybe we were better off apart. That I shouldn't have to stay in a marriage out of guilt. That I'd be happier with him. He even offered to support me if I left. She trailed off, realizing perhaps how bad that sounded. My hands gripped the arms of the chair. I knew it in my bones, but hearing it confirmed, Richard had actively worked to pull her away. It made my blood boil, but I kept my face impassive. Thank you for telling me the truth, I said after a heavy pause. My voice was tight. Now here's some truth for you. I'm not dropping the lawsuit, and the divorce will proceed as my lawyer sees fit. If you truly want to split things fairly and not fight, then don't fight what I file. But I won't be dissuaded from holding him accountable. She opened her mouth in protest, a fresh tear streaking down her cheek. Jack, please. It's going to ruin us. It will ruin him, I corrected, my tone turning icy. He had no problem ruining what we had. Now he faces the consequences. And you, Emily, you'll face yours. You say you want to do right by me now? Then accept whatever terms I and the law deem just. That's the only path forward I see. Her face crumpled as the last shred of hope faded from her expression. For a second, I almost faltered. It was like watching someone realize they had lost everything, because she had. But I steeled myself, remembering the sleepless nights, the lies, and the image of them together. I had given her love and trust. She had given me betrayal. This was the price, and we all had to pay it. Emily left the house in tears, a quiet goodbye murmured through sobs that I did not answer. As her car drove off, I retrieved the recorder, turning it off as the red light blinked steadily. My hands trembled, not with sadness, but with adrenaline. I had what I needed. Her own admission that Richard pursued her, that he urged her to leave me, that our marriage was whole enough, until he inserted himself into it. It was exactly the evidence Michelle had hoped for. I sank onto the couch, exhausted. The encounter had taken an emotional toll, hearing her apologize, confess regrets, even say she loved me still. In another world, Maybe those words would have pulled at my heart and broken my resolve. But too much had happened, and it was far too late. I reminded myself of the image of her and Richard at the hotel, at the cafe, everywhere they thought I wouldn't see. Intentional, repeated deceit. No, her tears would not sway me from seeing this through. If anything, our conversation only hardened my resolve. She had made her choices under his influence, and now both would answer for them. I sat there in the silence after the storm, a strange calm washing over me. I realized that, emotionally, something had shifted. I felt sad, yes, but it was a distant kind of sadness, as if the grieving part of me had finally accepted the death of our marriage. What remained was determination. The next phase was coming, and I was ready to face it head on. The day of the trial arrived on a crisp autumn morning. The alienation of affection lawsuit had not gone quietly. Richard, true to form, refused to settle or admit wrongdoing. Instead, he poured money into his defense, hiring a team of expensive lawyers to try to paint me as a bitter, vengeful husband whose marriage was already in ruins. But Michelle and I came prepared. After months of depositions, evidence gathering, and legal maneuvering, it was time to lay everything out before the court. I sat at the plaintiff's table in the courthouse, wearing my best suit, one I'd had since my cousin's wedding, and a steely expression. To my right was Michelle, calm and focused. Across the room sat Richard, looking less composed than the confident man I'd spied months ago at the hotel. His charm had curdled into a defensive scowl. Emily was also present, called as a witness for both sides. She looked nervous and tired, like a shell of the vibrant woman I once knew. The trial was intense and emotionally draining. I took the stand and in first-person detail recounted the slow death of my marriage at Richard's hands, the happiness Emily and I once shared, and how it unraveled after he entered the picture. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, bearing my pain in a room full of strangers, but I kept my voice steady. Michelle guided me through key points. Then Richard's lawyers tried to rattle me. They asked if I was a neglectful husband, if I drove Emily to cheat. I answered truthfully. I worked hard, but I never abandoned my wife, never stopped loving her, and never consented to anyone else's involvement in our marriage. My honesty must have rung true, because I saw a few jurors nodding subtly as I spoke. Then came the evidence. Photo after photo displayed for the court. Emily and Richard embracing, entering hotels, kissing by his car. Each one a knife that I'd already felt, now turned against him. We presented phone records and credit card bills, narrating a story of deceit. Michelle even played a portion of the recording I'd made when Emily came to the house, a calculated risk, but the judge allowed it over the defense's objection. In that muffled audio, Emily's voice admitted that Richard pursued her relentlessly and encouraged her to leave me. I watched Richard shift uncomfortably as those words filled the courtroom. It was damning. Emily herself testified as well. She was clearly conflicted, but under oath she corroborated the basics. That Richard knew she was married and still courted her. That he spoke ill of our marriage to convince her to be with him. The defense tried to highlight her consent and agency in the affair, something I never denied. She was responsible too. But the heart of my claim was that Richard willfully and maliciously inserted himself into a functioning marriage, and that I suffered harm as a result. In closing arguments, Michelle made an impassioned plea. "Marriage is a promise," she said, looking the jury in the eyes. "It can be fragile, yes, and people are imperfect. But what happened here was not an accidental failing between two spouses. It was a targeted campaign by a third party who saw something he wanted and took it. Consequences be damned. Mr. Thompson worked long hours to provide for his wife. That was his flaw, perhaps loving her too selflessly. For that, his trust was betrayed, and his life turned upside down. The law gives him recourse today to ask you for justice, to hold accountable the one who callously broke what should have been unbreakable. Her words stirred even me, and I was the one seeking redress. Richard's attorney, predictably, argued that their affair was a matter of mutual choice between consenting adults, that my marriage must have already been unsalvageable. But we had shown otherwise, through emails and testimonies of friends we called, who had seen Emily and me happy together before Richard's influence grew. We demonstrated the sudden change coinciding with his involvement. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated. It was the longest 3 hours of my life. Rachel waited with me outside the courtroom, offering quiet support. She had testified briefly to authenticate the photos and her investigative findings, then stayed as moral support, though she didn't have to. We didn't talk much. My nerves were too frayed, but her presence was a comfort. Finally, the bailiff announced that a verdict had been reached. I stood, palms sweaty, heart pounding. The jurors filed in, and the foreperson handed the verdict sheet to the judge. He read it silently, then had the foreperson read it aloud. Liable on all counts. They found in my favor. The judge awarded me damages, both compensatory and punitive. The number was substantial, enough to make Richard visibly blanch when he heard it. 7 figures. I didn't care about the exact amount beyond what it symbolized, a public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Richard buried his face in his hands. His empire of arrogance was crumbling. Emotion surged in me, relief, triumph, vindication. I fought the urge to let out the breath I'd been holding until I was outside. Stepping out of the courthouse into the afternoon sun, I felt years lighter. I saw Richard hurry out flanked by his lawyers, his face pale with fury and shock. No smug smirk now. When he noticed me watching, he looked away quickly, disappearing down the steps. Word later spread that he resigned from the firm to avoid further scandal. His pristine reputation in the community was shattered. Consequences, at last. Emily exited quietly with her attorney. We locked eyes for a brief moment. There was no triumph in her expression, just sorrow and exhaustion. The divorce settlement had been finalized the day before, fair but firm. She waived any claim to alimony, given her actions, and we divided our modest assets without dispute. I kept the house. She kept her car and some savings to start over. It was more than many might say she deserved, but I wasn't out to destroy her utterly. I just refused to be her victim. She offered me a tentative nod, maybe in congratulations, maybe in a final gesture of apology. I'm not sure. I returned a polite nod and watched her walk away. She would not leave this unscathed either. The affair and lawsuit had become public knowledge in our circles. Friends and family knew what had happened. She left town not long after. Too many bridges burned and memories tainted. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was living alone in a small apartment, working a new job far from the one where she'd met Richard. I hoped she would find her own path to redemption someday, but that was no longer anything I had to concern myself with. I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing in the crisp air and feeling, for the first time in a long time, a sense of peace. It was over. I had won. Not just the case, but a measure of personal justice that so few betrayed spouses ever get. The two people who hurt me had been held to account in every way the world could offer: legal, financial, social. They would survive, but they would carry the scars of this with them, as I had carried mine. And me? I got my dignity back. My faith that right can prevail, though the cost had been high. And something more. I had gained a profound understanding of my own strength and worth. I wasn't the naive, trusting man I once was. I bore new scars, too, but they were a testament to what I'd endured and overcome. I turned to Rachel, who had been waiting a respectful distance away during my quiet moment of reflection. She gave me a warm smile, her eyes shining with pride. Without a word, I walked over and pulled her into a tight hug. It felt natural and good. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" she asked, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "For everything. Believing in me. Helping me fight. Being here." My throat was tight. Not with sadness this time, but with gratitude. She pulled back slightly to look at me. "You did this, Jack. I just helped. I'm so proud of you." Impulsively, I leaned down and kissed her cheek, a gesture of affection that felt both sudden and inevitable. She blushed, and I realized with a small thrill that I wasn't scared of what came next. For the first time in months, I was actually looking forward to the future. "Come on," I said, letting my arms settle naturally around her waist as we began to descend the courthouse steps together. "Let's get out of here." As we walked away from the halls of justice and all the pain they had witnessed, I felt the sunlight on my face and the weight lift from my shoulders. The war was over. I had not only survived, I had triumphed. And beside me was someone who saw me at my worst and helped me find my way back. The road ahead looked brighter than it had in a long, long time. Emily and Richard were ghosts of a past I was ready to leave behind, left to reckon with what their own choices had wrought. I was done with them. My story was now about healing and new beginnings. With each step I took away from that courthouse, away from vengeance and heartbreak, I walked toward something better. My heart was battered, yes, but not broken beyond repair. In fact, it was hopeful. And as I held the door open for Rachel and we headed out into the world beyond, I knew this much. I was walking into a future that was entirely my own, and it was finally looking bright.